man, I love granola. Carbohydrates. They can make or break a workout. They can also make or break recovery too, and influence how likely it is that you can perform high quality interval training. This is actually one of those areas which is important to nail. As a coach and athlete, it can be really obvious when people get it right and when they get it wrong. But if you know how, it's easy to get it right. So let's knowledge it up in here and talk about whether you need carbs after a workout and how you can get the most out of your training. And I'm going to finish my granola before we carry on. So welcome back to another video, nutrition nerds. The topic of today's video is carbohydrates after exercise. Depending on who you talk to, carbs are awesome, or they're awful. So there's got to be a good answer as to whether we should have them after exercise. And there is. Now some of you will know this already, but we use carbohydrates for energy, and we use fat as well. And depending on how long and how hard we exercise for, we use different amounts of both. In a nutshell, harder exercise means we use more carbs, and easier exercise means we use more fat. And that principle is going to help give us the answer as to whether we need carbs as a priority after we exercise. When it comes to exercise, we've got a limited amount of carbohydrates stored as glycogen primarily in the muscles, but we've got essentially an unlimited amount of fat. So carbs have to be the focus because they can run out. So if you're just doing easy training, you're not training particularly hard or frequently, so we're talking training something like a couple of times a week, it's less than an hour, and you generally eat pretty well, carbs are not going to be super important after your training. The reason for this is that it's going to be unlikely that you burn through all of your carb stores, or need them soon enough again to really worry about it. Now don't get me wrong, I would still recommend that you have a good healthy meal in the hour after you've finished training with carbohydrates. But it isn't as much as a priority, so you don't need to smash in loads of shakes, gels or sports drinks. The group that this becomes really important for are those who are training hard and training for performance. If you're in this group, then you do need to think about it. The more you train, the more you're going to have to fight to keep on top of your carbohydrate stores. Because we use carbs when we exercise, and then we also use them for just general day-to-day activities, and then we refill them with food. Research shows that having simple to digest carbohydrates after exercise helps to refill these stores at a quicker rate. But we'll go over that properly in a moment. Now, an added benefit to having carbohydrates after a workout is it helps to keep the calories up. Athletes who frequently train hard can struggle to get enough calories in the day to match their training volume. So having carbs straight after exercise just adds to that calorie total. Another reason, which seems as good as any for having carbs after training, is that some markers of bone turnover, essentially bone breaking down, seems to be higher after exercise where you don't consume any carbohydrates after it. This suggests that there might be an increased risk of stress fractures if you regularly don't consume carbohydrates after exercise. And given the athletes in the group that I'm talking about will be pushing their training anyway, reducing the chance of a stress fracture is a pretty good idea. So if you're in this group, how do you do it? You want a source of easily digested carbs immediately after your workout. Because they're easier to digest, they help replenish your stores at a quicker rate. I would also recommend having some protein because the protein helps to repair your muscle tissue. I've put some examples in the description for you for some potential post-workout high-carby snacks. Your aim here is about 1 gram of carbohydrates per kilogram of body weight in this post-exercise snack, and somewhere between 20 to 30 grams of protein. And about an hour after your snack, have a normal meal full of healthy, delicious food, still containing carbohydrates. Now, I always advocate a food-first approach, and for the majority of people, this is the best option. You don't need to spend loads of money on supplements, but for some athletes, it might sometimes be the better option. I've done a video on supplement guidance for athletes, and I would encourage you to watch that before you do use any. But are there any reasons why you shouldn't go for this immediate high-carb recovery snack? Well, there are a few reasons that I can think of. Firstly is if you have a specific goal or reason why you want to restrict carbohydrates after your exercise. I did a video on the train high, sleep low method, where you restrict your carb intake after high intensity training as a potential strategy to improve your performance. Another reason might be a change in the intensity or volume of your training. If you've suddenly eased off your training, then you might be better off just going for a normal meal soon after training instead. This kind of approach with easy to digest carbohydrates isn't necessary if you're not really pushing it or you haven't done a hard intensity session. The things to balance it out against are extra calories and weight gain, and dental problems associated with sweetened foods, especially liquid ones. Either way, it's not something you need after every session, and I wouldn't advise it either. Be strategic with your eating and set up good habits for the right times. It's these little improvements in your nutrition which will set you up well for long-term consistency, and that's where you'll see your biggest gains. And that brings us to the end of today's video. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you found it useful. And as always, if you haven't already, then give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to stay up to date with everything that I release. And I will catch you next time. See ya. So let's talk about whether you need carbs after a workout.